This video is brought to you by patreon.com/worsttake. Get access to exclusive live streams and Discord servers, on-screen shoutouts, and early access to some videos when you join now. Help make sure that we can continue to make content like this by supporting the Patreon. Links are in the description down below. Hey, what's up, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so just jump into it. The first question comes from Eric, who says, are there any draft and stash develop type players that you would like that would be good for the Browns to grab, could potentially become starters after the season? If so, who do you see as the best candidates? Well, since basketball has multiple mechanisms for those draft and stash where you can keep somebody overseas or put somebody in the G League. Now in the NFL, it's a little bit different. There's not really that kind of an opportunity. For example, maybe Siaki Ika is a draft and stash prospect. Maybe Cedric Tillman is, Anthony Schwartz is. So do I think that there's somebody that raw in this year's draft that could be a draft and stash type player? Maybe Kingsley Sumatia, if he makes it to the Browns at 54, maybe. But I don't really see a ton of opportunity. There's not a ton of guys who haven't played a lot of football in this year's draft class. Honestly, there's a ton of the opposite, and that's starting to become a problem because the whole draft class seems like there's a bunch of 24-year-olds, 25-year-olds, and guys who have played almost too much football up until this point to where they're draft eligible. So I think it's actually the exact opposite problem the Browns are having. If this draft was full of draft and stash players, I think the Browns would pick 8 picks deep into it because they're a team that can use some draft and develop kind of guys. But this year, I mean, there's I'm exaggerating, but there's 12 people under the age of 22 in this draft class, or at least it feels like it. So yeah, it's just a tough situation for the Browns, but I don't really think there's a ton of opportunity there for that. Michael says, what do you think is more likely, the Browns trade out the second round or trade up to get in another pick in the second? I'd prefer trading up and coming away with 2 of either Kingsley, Pearsall, Cooper. Would be an A+ draft in my eyes. I think the most realistic trade up possibility, because I just don't think the Browns have the ammunition without sacrificing picks next year, and I don't think they want to do that, to trade up from 2. What could happen is that they trade up from 85. They might move 10 picks up to the 70s to get a better grab on somebody that they like there. I think that's a little bit more likely than the Browns trading up into the second round or at the beginning of the second round or something like that. Gruff22 says, hey, Happy Chubb's back. Eventually, he has not been extended, but this does increase the chance that they use a higher pick on a running back to cover all eventualities. Who knows how this injury may affect him down the line. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't get the belief that the Cleveland Browns and many people who cover the draft in general think that there's a prospect that's that much better than just having Donta Foreman and Jerome Ford, if it comes down to it. This is a bad running back class. And since it's a bad running back class, guys who would be third-round picks are now the number 1 running back on the draft board. It's not great. There's not a ton. This isn't like a couple of years ago where there was good running backs up until the 4th round. This is a draft class where you might just want to avoid running back altogether because the value doesn't seem like it's going to be there. Honestly, after Trey Benson, it gets real tough to even see a lot of these guys being rostered. There's guys I like Dylan Laub, but I like Dylan Laub as somebody you give an opportunity to in camp, not somebody who's going to hold it down if Nick Chubb gets hurt. So honestly, I think that's the Browns' strategy. I think that they're fine with going in with Jerome Ford, who did have 800 yards, over 1,000 all-purpose yards. It's funny how we forgot that happened. So he's not as bad as the internet makes him out to be. And Donta Foreman, who can split the load. And I think between the two of those, you can easily get 12 to 1,500 yards. It's not going to be perfect, but it'd be a functional run game. And I think that's how they're covering for all eventualities on that position. I don't think they're going to really draft anybody just because I don't think the value proposition is going to be right for them. Christopher says, what do you foresee being the top 3/4 realistic draft names you feel like the Browns are getting drafted by the Browns if they have the chance? Keon Coleman, Christian Jones. I am so afraid they're going to take Patrick Paul. Like, I'm really afraid they're going to take a chance on Patrick Paul because the Browns kind of like guys like Patrick Paul, but I hope not Patrick Paul. And then Ricky Pearsall's too old. Like Xavier Worthy. Yeah, Xavier Worthy fits everything that the Browns look for in wide receiver. Even if it's not a pick that I would love, it's something that they probably would do. Russell says that the Browns do enough to fix the defense from getting cooked in misdirection / RPO plays. Me personally, I don't think so. We love to see them add a linebacker. Okay, man. This is so in the offseason, we remember some of the issues that a team had. And since there's not a ton of football to watch, we spend a lot of time thinking about the issues that the team had. So much so that we overrepresent how many times that was an issue for the Browns. Now, were there certain times in games where RPO and misdirection was an issue for the Cleveland Browns? Yeah, absolutely. You can point to the Seattle game. You can point to the Colts game. You can point to the first Baltimore game. Were there always other factors at play that really exacerbated that problem, though, every time it popped up? Yeah, 90% of the time, you were getting cooked, quote unquote, with misdirection RPO. It was less about the misdirection of RPO cooking you and more about the lack of penetration you were getting from the defensive line outside of Myles Garrett. That's really what determined the Browns' success or failure on defense last year was, hey, are the three guys outside of Myles winning their one-on-ones? Are your tackles winning their two-way goals? If that happens consistently, there's literally not much a team can do against the Cleveland Browns. The San Francisco 49ers tried misdirection on the Browns. It just did not work. But if those guys aren't winning those battles, then yeah, the misdirection stuff's going to work. A lot of stuff's going to work because that's where the Browns defense really starts their engine. So I think it's less about the misdirection RPO plays. I think that's a side effect of the actual problem. And the problem was we did not have great counters for when teams basically decided that they're going to roll all of it, no matter what, to Myles Garrett. We just did not have the right counters. And I think Jim Schwartz is going to cook up some stuff to make sure that they have better things in play. Maybe he's going to rely on less stunts and twists on that side where Myles Garrett is and probably try to roll some things off of that or try to have corners kind of slow play stuff because they know that the ball's coming out quick. It's just teams adjusted to Myles in a way that they don't usually adjust to players. And I think when you hear Jim Schwartz talk about it, he talks about it with the same shock that he did with Calvin Johnson, where it kind of just broke the laws of football, how teams went and decided to kind of adjust for Myles Garrett. I think that's more of the problem. I think too much has been made out of the whole RPO misdirection stuff. I think it's a symptom of a problem, but I don't think it is the problem itself. And as far as the RPO misdirection stuff goes, I think the fact that they're going to practice against it a ton now because Ken Dorsey's here to bring more of that in, they're probably going to be better against it. I think, again, just to summarize my whole point down so I don't get misunderstood here to the best possible extent. The Browns' issue last year, when you really boil it down, was, are they getting pressure outside of Myles? Are the tackles winning their two-way goals? Are we getting to the quarterback? Are we finishing plays when we get to the quarterback? If you watch the games again, if you look at the tape, you'll see that that's a constant. Whenever the Browns defense is having a bad day, that is what's happening. The Browns have had good games versus RPO in misdirection. They've had bad games against RPO in misdirection, but they've never had a good game when those guys are not winning outside of Miles. And they've never had a bad game when those guys are winning outside of Miles. So that's really what it boils down to, in my opinion, to be quite frank with you, because I hear this a lot, and it's just, and I don't mean to, like, I don't want to react the way I reacted to the question. Like, I don't think your question was dumb, Russell. It's something I hear a lot, and it was time for me to address it. So thank you for asking the question, brother. Quan says, the Browns get a lot of ridicule for being on the losing end of the OBJ and Deshaun Watson trades. How do you think the Browns fare overall in the trades that they've made in the recent years? I mean, for every Odell Beckham trade you lose, you can get an Amari Cooper trade that you win by a country mile. So it kind of like, I feel like we overvalue how much it matters to lose a trade. Like, that is one of the things that, since we talk about trades and, oh, that didn't work out for that team, we never talk about how much it matters. And honestly, like, how much does it matter if you win the trade? Like, a lot of the Houston Texans' success last year did not have to do with the fact that they won the Deshaun Watson trade. It's more or less that they drafted CJ Stroud number 2 overall. If they took Bryce Young number 2 overall, or if the Panthers took CJ Stroud and they took Bryce Young, them winning the Deshaun Watson trade up to this point would not have mattered in any tangible way, because the Browns would have still been a playoff contender and the Texans would have been awful. But since the Panthers took Bryce Young, they got CJ Stroud, it all looks so much better now. Let's even make this an easier point. The Odell Beckham trade, right? The Browns did not win that trade. Odell Beckham was not more valuable than the 2 first-round picks that they sent out. But it's not like the Giants really did much with what they got with the Odell Beckham trade, because they're still in the same spot that they were as a franchise from when they traded for Odell, when they traded Odell Beckham to now. They've been in that same spot this whole time. You can argue, even though the Browns lost the trade, they have made leaps in where they stand in the NFL versus where the Giants are, which again begs the question, how much does it really matter if you lose a trade? I don't think it does. If you have the resources to make up for it, if you have the money and ownership to keep your players, if you have the roster in place to withstand losing a trade, then you'll probably be fine, right? Like the San Francisco 49ers. I don't even remember who they traded with to get Trey Lance, but they lost that trade, right? They traded 3 first-round picks for Trey Lance, and Trey Lance played 4 games for them, right? A massive loss on that trade. One of the biggest losses of all time. It doesn't matter. They're still able to win games, because at the end of the day, the San Francisco 49ers were in a place with their roster where they had enough infrastructure to where losing that trade didn't matter. But the possibility that they could have won that trade, it mattered, right? I am always going to push for teams that have great rosters, that have money and ownership, and that have the ability to maintain and keep guys on the roster long term. I'm always going to push those guys to make trades that they feel like could pay off big in the long run, because that's how you make the leap from a mediocre team to a great team. Like, I don't know how the Stephon Diggs trade is going to work out for the Houston Texans. It could be great. It could be a smoking disaster. But at the end of the year, if it sucks, they just get rid of Stephon Diggs and move on. They still got CJ Stroud. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to matter. Like, it's more important that teams consistently take swings, because when you look at the teams who win and quote unquote lose these trades, look at where they're at. Are the Giants in a better place than the Cleveland Browns are right now? I would argue not even close, right? They're paying the same amount of money for a quarterback who has done significantly less than Deshaun Watson at that position. The same $45 to $46 million a year. And their team's not as good as the Browns. They don't have a Myles Garrett. They don't have a Denzel Ward. They're just nowhere near as good as the Browns are right now. The San Francisco 49ers and whomever they made that trade with, I promise you the San Francisco 49ers are probably in a better place than that team. You can even go to any trade, or not any trade, but most of these trades, it doesn't really work out how you would think, and losing a trade really doesn't change much. Like, we won that Amari Cooper trade by a country mile, but the Browns and Dallas are still relatively in the same place. Like, no team has been stunted because of the success or failure in that trade, because Dallas is Dallas, the Browns are the Browns. Like, they're both kind of in good spots. So that's my little rant about winning and losing trades and how much over analysis we do about it. Because you can say up to this point, the Browns have not won the Deshaun Watson trade, and they certainly didn't win the Odell Beckham trade. But how much does it matter? It's a real question. We talk about this stuff all the time, and I'm not saying how much does it matter in like a, well, it's just football kind of way. I'm just saying, like, in the world of football, in the context of football, in the context of the NFL, in the context of the things that are going to affect the NFL season, how much does it matter if they won or lost that trade? Because if winning or losing a trade was super important, the 49ers would be drafted in the top 5 this year. But they're one of the best teams in the NFL. So, again, you know what I mean? Like, does it really matter if you win or lose a trade? I think it just matters if you take those shots. I'd rather swing for an Odell Beckham, swing for Deshaun Watson, swing for an Amari Cooper, and maybe I hit on one, or maybe I hit on 1.5 of those. But that's going to put me in a better spot than not doing anything at all. The next question comes from Chris Gustafaro. Says, hey, Q, do you think this is finally the year Myles hits 20 sacks? Myles ain't never, no team is ever going to let Myles get to 20 sacks. I'm just going to put that out there right now. Once they put 2 tight ends in motion versus Myles Garrett, we should have known that the sack total would never get to 20, because that was a team deciding, we don't care. He's not going to get a sack, right? Like, we will do whatever is necessary for him not to get a sack. And since he gets covered in a way that nobody else does in the NFL, he's probably never going to get to 20. If he does, it's going to be one of the most impressive feats in modern football history, because teams are literally like cooking up stuff to make sure that Myles, like, legitimately does not have a chance. It's not just like, oh, we're going to double team him. No, we're going to double team him, chip him, and we're going to throw the ball right away on a jet screen or something like that, right? Like, that's what teams are doing. They're not even trying to throw the ball in good faith when 95 is out there. So the things that need to happen for you to get 20 sacks, like, you kind of got to catch a team by surprise to get 20 sacks. Will catch a league by surprise to get 20 sacks, and Myles getting 20, dog. That's tough. It's going to be tough, man. They have absolutely given up on the ideal of stopping him. And that means that they're just not going to give him opportunities. He's on that Revis Island. Like, honestly, like, getting to 13 again, getting to 16 again is going to be difficult for Myles, just because teams, like, he has to almost hit on like 90% of his sack opportunities to get to like 16. For him to get to 20, he has to hit on like 108% of his sack opportunities, because teams just aren't going to give it to him. Even if he wins every rep, even if he blow bys people, even if he does all that, teams are just so desperate not to hold on to the ball when Myles is out on the field that it's going to be tough for him to get to 20. If he does, it's a feat for sure. Cool Guy says, are you going to stream the draft days 2 and 3? Yeah, I'm going to be doing a day 2 and 3 stream. I'm also going to be simulcasting on this channel, my AFC North Talk stream. So come down, check it out, and come kick it with me, talk in the chat, everything else that's going down for all 3 days of the draft. It's always a good vibe. It's always a good time. Make sure y'all check that out. Draven Driver says, is there any part of the Browns team that scares you heading into the season? I would say, to me, what always makes me worried is that defense of all units has a hard time carrying over from year to year. It could be so volatile, things like turnovers and everything. The one thing that does give me a lot of solace in what the Browns were able to do last year is that they had a lot of defensive dominance without having a ton of turnovers. And that tells me that what they do can be transferred from year to year a little bit more easily than the team that kind of just get a ton of turnovers over a year or something like that. Like they got really lucky. So yeah, that's kind of my one thing that I think about. But thank you guys for asking these questions. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.